The Ardani Central Council chamber glowed with soft blue light from the curved walls. Elder Terra stood at the center platform, her four-fingered hands hovering over the quantum beacon controls. Her silver skin reflected the emergency lights that had been flashing for days across their planet. Around her, 7 council members remained from the original 23. The Void Reapers had been thorough in their initial strikes. "We must consider what we're about to do," said Councillor Navi, his normally calm voice trembling. His luminescent skin pulsed rapidly with anxiety, casting flickering shadows. "This beacon will broadcast our exact location to unknown regions of space. What if we attract something more dangerous than the Reapers?" Elder Terra's large eyes blinked slowly, her outer membranes showing the exhaustion of sleepless cycles. "We have discussed this for too long. Our cities burn. Our people die. What could be worse than extinction?" The Void Reapers had appeared 3 months ago at the edge of Ardani space. They came without warning or communication. Massive organic ships that consumed everything in their path. The Ardani, peaceful for thousands of years, had no true weapons or warships. Their shields, designed for stellar radiation, failed against the Reapers' plasma attacks. The council chamber shook as another distant explosion rattled the planet's surface. The Reapers were methodically destroying orbital platforms and communication arrays. The capital city was among the last strongholds. "Our defensive shields will fail completely within 9 days," said Minister Lona, the oldest council member. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen centuries of peace now shattered. "Every evacuation ship we've sent has been destroyed." Scientist June approached the central platform. Unlike the other Ardani, whose movements were typically fluid and graceful, June moved with sharp, urgent steps. His research team had been working without rest since the first attack. "The quantum beacon is untested at this range," June explained, activating a holographic display that showed their galaxy and surrounding regions. "But theoretically, it can send a targeted signal beyond our known space, bypassing the Reaper blockade. We've detected unusual energy patterns from this sector." He pointed to a spiral arm far from their position. "What makes you think anyone would help us?" asked Councillor Somi, whose family had been lost in the initial attacks. Her voice was hollow. "Most spacefaring races we've encountered have been peaceful traders like ourselves. None have the means to fight the Reapers." June's face hardened. "The energy patterns suggest highly advanced technology, different from anything in our records." And he hesitated. "There are unusual radiation signatures consistent with weapons testing." The room grew quieter. The Ardani had evolved as a cooperative species, their biology and culture shaped by mutual assistance rather than competition. The concept of a species developing primarily for warfare was almost incomprehensible to them. "You want to call upon warriors," Elder Terra stated simply. It wasn't a question. "I want to call upon survivors," June corrected. "A species that knows how to fight. We don't have that knowledge. We need someone who does." Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered and emergency systems wailed briefly before resetting. "The message is prepared," said June, transferring data to the beacon controls. "A universal mathematical sequence establishing intelligence, followed by our coordinates and a simple plea in multiple formats. Any advanced species will understand." Elder Terra looked around the chamber. "We will vote. Those who—" "There's no time for voting," interrupted Minister Lona, standing shakily. "The Reapers have breached the atmospheric defense grid. We have hours, not days." Faces turned toward Elder Terra. She had led the council for 60 years, through prosperity and scientific advancement. Now she would lead them in what might be their final act. "Scientist June, activate the beacon," she ordered. June stepped forward, entering final calculations. "The signal will be detectable by the Reapers. They will likely accelerate their attack once they realize what we've done. Then we face our end with hope rather than despair," said Elder Terra, placing her hands on the activation panel beside June's. Together, they pressed the crystal controls. The room hummed as power diverted from across the city to the quantum beacon. The tall spire above the council chamber glowed brilliant white, visible across the capital. The quantum message, compressed, coded, and accelerated, shot outward faster than light itself, traveling paths through subspace that the Ardani had only recently discovered. "Now we wait," said Elder Terra. The waiting was brief. Within 20 minutes, the Reaper ships changed formation. Their attack patterns shifted from methodical to urgent. They recognized the beacon activation and understood its purpose. "They know," whispered Counselor Navi. "They're coming for us now." June rushed to a monitoring station. "They're concentrating fire on the central districts. They want to destroy the beacon before any response can reach us." The council chamber shook violently. Support beams cracked. 2 council members fell as the floor tilted. "Evacuate to the underground chambers," ordered Elder Terra. "We must survive long enough to receive any response." As they moved toward the emergency lifts, a technician burst into the room. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "Elder, the beacon, it's receiving a transmission." "Impossible," said June, rushing back to the controls. Even at quantum speeds, no signal could return this quickly unless they were already near, finished Elder Terra. The council gathered around the beacon as June worked to decode the incoming message. The building shook continuously now as Reaper weapons targeted the government district. "It's a simple format," said June, surprise evident in his voice. "Basic universal code. Whoever sent this wanted to ensure we understood immediately." The message appeared as text on the display screen, translated into Ardani script. "We hear you. We are coming. Prepare for humanity." "Humanity," read Counselor Sony. "I've never encountered that species in any record." "Nor I," said Minister Lona, leaning closer to the screen. "Are there any visual transmissions?" Before June could answer, the beacon received a secondary data packet. When opened, it displayed a single image, a vessel unlike any the Ardani had seen. Where Ardani ships were smooth and curved, this craft was angular, reinforced, with visible weapon systems along its hull. In the background of the image, dozens more such ships were visible. "They're a war fleet," whispered Navi, his skin pulsing rapidly with fear. A third transmission arrived. Coordinates and a time frame. 6 hours. "Whatever these humans are," said Elder Terra, studying the image, "they will arrive before our shields fail completely." "And if they're worse than the Reapers?" asked Somi. June looked up from the beacon controls, his expression grim yet hopeful. "Then we made our choice." But the speed of their response, the directness of their message, they were waiting, watching. Perhaps even watching the Reapers. Why stay hidden unless they were avoiding exactly this situation, finished Elder Terra. Being called upon to fight someone else's war. The council chamber shook again, more violently. Structural supports began to fail. "We move to the underground chambers now," ordered Elder Terra. "We have 6 hours to prepare for the arrival of humanity, whatever that may be." As they evacuated, June looked once more at the image of the human ships. Something about their design, their obvious purpose, sent both fear and hope through him. They had called into the darkness of space, and something had answered immediately. He only hoped they hadn't doomed themselves by asking for help from something far more dangerous than even the Void Reapers. 3 massive ships appeared suddenly at the edge of Ardani space. One moment there was nothing but stars, and the next, 3 dark vessels hung against the backdrop of space. They emerged from hyperspace without the usual energy flare that marked Ardani ships or even the organic ripple effect of Void Reaper vessels. The ships simply appeared, as if they had always been there. The Ardani Orbital Defense Station detected them immediately. The remaining technicians watched in silent terror as their sensors analyzed the newcomers. These ships were nothing like the flowing, rounded Ardani vessels built for scientific exploration. These were angular, armored vessels with obvious weapon mounts protruding from strategic positions. The central ship was twice the size of the others, with a forward section that resembled a pointed spear. "Are they Reaper reinforcements?" asked a young technician, her voice trembling. The station commander shook his head. "No, different design entirely. And look, they're positioning themselves between our planet and the Reaper fleet." Indeed, the three vessels moved with surprising speed, taking up defensive positions that partially shielded the Ardani homeworld from the Void Reaper armada that had been methodically destroying the planet's outer defenses. In the underground council chamber, Elder Terra received the news with guarded hope. The message said, "Humanity. These must be the humans." "The Reapers have stopped their advance," reported June, who monitored the orbital sensors. "They're holding position, just watching these new arrivals." A communication request pinged through the Ardani emergency channels. The voice that came through their speakers was unlike any they had heard, deeper than Ardani voices, with a cadence that seemed almost musical yet direct. "Ardani Central Council, this is Captain Hyun of the Earth vessel Intrepid. We received your distress call. Request immediate meeting with your leadership. We can transport representatives to our ship or send a delegation to your location." The council members exchanged nervous glances. "Transport to their ship would be too risky," said Councillor Navi. "Agreed," said Elder Tyra. "Invite them here." She paused. "And prepare our greeting hall. It seems we have our first true alien visitors." An hour later, a small craft detached from the main human vessel and descended toward the Ardani capital. The city was damaged from Reaper attacks, but the central government district remained mostly intact, protected by the last functioning shields. The human shuttle was escorted by the few remaining Ardani defense craft, though it was clear from the shuttle's design that it could have easily outrun them if desired. The landing pad outside the council chambers had been cleared of debris. Elder Terra stood with 5 council members and scientist June, all wearing their formal attire despite the circumstances. This was, after all, first contact with an unknown species, one that might determine the fate of their entire civilization. The human shuttle touched down with precision. It was smaller than expected, but clearly armed. A door slid open, and 3 figures emerged. The Ardani collectively gasped. These creatures were unlike anything in their records. They walked on 2 legs instead of the Ardani's 4 limbs. Their bodies were solid and dense-looking, covered in close-fitting dark material that might have been armor or perhaps clothing. They had only 2 arms, but those arms looked powerful. Most striking were their faces, smaller eyes than the Ardani, no luminescent skin patterns, and a strange collection of features centered around what appeared to be sensory organs. The central figure, slightly shorter than the others, but clearly in command, approached Elder Terra. Up close, the differences became even more apparent. This human moved with a predatory grace that reminded some council members of the dangerous wildlife in Ardani's southern continent. Every movement seemed calculated, efficient, and somehow dangerous. "Elder Terra," the human asked, its mouth forming unfamiliar sounds that were translated through a small device at its neck. "I am Elder Tyra," she responded, performing the traditional Ardani greeting gesture with her 4 hands. "Welcome to our world, though I regret the circumstances of our meeting. Captain Hyun of the Earth Defense Force." The human replied with a slight nod. "These are my officers, Lieutenant Tai and Security Chief 1. The Ardani council chamber had been prepared hastily. The humans were offered seats at the council table, though they seemed uncomfortable with the Ardani seating designed for different body types. Captain Hyun sat with a straight back, her posture relaxed yet somehow intimidating. The other humans remained standing slightly behind her, their eyes constantly scanning the room in a way that made the Ardani nervous. "Your signal reached Earth space 10 days ago," Captain Hyun explained, her voice calm but direct. "We've been observing the Void Reaper movements for some time. We chose to remain hidden until a species worthy of alliance called for help." The council members whispered among themselves, Noting the human's dense musculature visible even through her uniform, her efficient movements, and what June had already categorized as predatory eyes, forward-facing for hunting, unlike the Ardani's side-set eyes evolved for detecting danger while grazing. "You knew about the Reapers?" asked June, unable to contain his scientific curiosity. "How long have you been watching our region of space?" "Earth has had long-range observation posts in this sector for approximately 15 of your cycles," replied Captain Hyun. "We detected the Reaper High ships entering your territory 92 days ago. We've encountered them before." "You fought them?" Elder Terra asked, leaning forward with sudden hope. "And survived." "We've done more than survive," said Lieutenant Tai from behind Captain Hyun. His voice was deeper, with an edge that made several council members flinch. "We've driven them back 3 times from other systems." Captain Hyun raised a hand slightly, and Lieutenant Tai immediately fell silent. The display of clear hierarchy and immediate compliance wasn't lost on the Ardani. "Why didn't you warn us?" asked Counselor Somi, her voice showing rare anger. "Millions have died. Earth's policy is non-interference." Captain Hyun responded without defensiveness. "We observe, we learn, we prepare. We only engage when directly approached or when we find species with potential for true alliance." "And you believe we have such potential?" Elder Terra asked carefully. Captain Hyun studied the Ardani for a moment before answering. "Your people develop remarkable technologies without developing weapons. Your social structure evolved through cooperation rather than competition. These are rare traits in our experience. Yet you clearly evolved differently," noted Jun, gesturing to the weapons visible on the humans' uniforms. Captain Hyun smiled, revealing teeth clearly evolved for omnivorous consumption. Another shock to the herbivorous Ardani. "Our path was more difficult than yours. Earth species competed, predator and prey. Survival often meant conflict." Elder Terra studied the human cautiously. "Your species appears formidable." Captain Hyun's smile widened slightly. "You have no idea." The meeting continued with exchange of basic information. The humans explained their presence. 3 warships now, but more could arrive within days if needed. They described Earth only in vague terms, though they mentioned it was one of several human-inhabited worlds. What became increasingly clear to the Ardani was that these humans were warriors in a way the peaceful Ardani could barely comprehend. As the meeting concluded, Captain Hyun stood. "The Reapers will attack our position within hours. They're calling for reinforcements. We need to prepare your people." "Prepare how?" asked Minister Lona. "We have no weapons, no defensive training." "Then we will protect you," said Captain Hyun simply. "But first, we need access to your technology, your communication systems, and any information you have on Reaper movements. This fight has just begun." As the humans left to return to their ships, Jun approached Elder Terra. "They're predators," he whispered. "Everything about them. Their eyes, their teeth, their movements. They evolved to hunt." Elder Terra watched the humans' departing shuttle. "Yes. And now they hunt for us." The Void Reaper Armada filled the view screens of the Ardani Defense Station. 23 massive biomechanical ships, each resembling a cross between an insect and a deep-sea predator, moved in perfect formation toward the planet. Their dark hulls absorbed light rather than reflected it, making them appear as moving shadows against the stars. Smaller attack craft swarmed around them like angry insects protecting their hive. From the station's command center, Mira and the other Ardani technicians watched with a mixture of terror and fragile hope. The 3 human warships, Intrepid, Horizon, and Dauntless, looked impossibly small against the approaching Reaper fleet. "The Reapers have never encountered modified shields like ours," said Elder Terra, who had insisted on remaining at the station rather than evacuating to the planet's surface. "Perhaps this will work." The first wave of Reaper attack craft surged forward, their organic shapes twisting as they accelerated. They fired concentrated energy beams at the Ardani orbital platforms, the same weapons that had cut through the planet's defenses for weeks. But this time, something different happened. The modified shields glowed brightly and reflected the energy back toward the attackers. 3 Reaper craft were hit by their own weapons and spun out of control. A cheer went up from the Ardani technicians. Mira's skin flushed with hopeful blue patterns. Some modifications worked. Their celebration was short-lived. The main Reaper vessels adjusted quickly, changing their weapon frequency. The next volley struck the shields differently, and while they didn't collapse immediately, the energy readings began to fluctuate dangerously. "They're adapting," Mira said, her voice tight with renewed fear. "The shields won't hold against sustained attacks with changing frequencies." On the bridge of the human flagship Horizon, Commander Jin watched the Reaper adjustments with grim satisfaction. The compact man with intense eyes and a perpetual slight frown, Jin had fought the Reapers twice before. He understood their tactical patterns better than anyone in Earth's fleet. "They're focusing on the shield frequencies," he noted to his bridge crew. "Just as expected." His tactical officer nodded. "The Ardani shields are drawing their attention. Main Reaper vessels are committing to the attack pattern." Jin studied the holographic battle display hovering in the center of the bridge. The Reaper command ships were positioning themselves in their standard formation, a curved line that allowed overlapping fields of fire while keeping their vulnerable central sections protected. "Status of Intrepid and Dauntless?" Jin asked. "In position and awaiting your command," replied his communications officer. Jin took a deep breath. What they were about to attempt had never been tried against a Reaper fleet this size. "Signal the Ardani station to prepare for shield failure. Tell them to cycle power as Engineer Sung instructed." On the Ardani station, alarms blared as shield strength dropped below 40%. The orbital platforms shook with each new impact. Through the observation windows, Mira could see Reaper attack craft swarming closer, their organic shapes more terrifying up close. "Incoming transmission from Horizon," announced the communication officer. "They say to prepare for shield failure and cycle power on command." Elder Terra looked confused. "But that would leave us completely exposed." "I think that's their plan," Mira realized suddenly. "The humans want the Reapers to commit fully to attacking us." On the Horizon's bridge, Commander Jin watched as the last of the Reaper capital ships moved into attack position. The enemy clearly believed they were about to break through the Ardani defenses and finish what they had started weeks ago. All 23 main vessels were now focused on the planet and its orbital defenses. "Now," shouted Commander Jin, "all vessels, execute maneuver Theta Strike." The 3 human warships suddenly accelerated to attack speed. Instead of maintaining their defensive position around the Ardani world, they shot forward directly toward the Reaper formation. This was not a cautious approach. It was a full-speed charge directly at the center of the enemy fleet. The Reapers, caught by surprise, tried to reorient their weapons, but their formation had been optimized for bombarding the planet, not defending against an attack from what they had considered an inferior force. "Signal the Ardani to cycle shields now," Jin ordered. On the station, Mira received the command and immediately initiated the power cycle. The shields around the planet and orbital facilities dropped completely, making the Ardani technicians gasp in fear. But the Reapers didn't press their apparent advantage. They were too busy trying to deal with the human ships that were now tearing through their formation at speeds the Reapers hadn't thought possible for vessels that size. The Horizon led the charge, its forward plasma cannons firing continuously at the nearest Reaper vessel. The enemy ship's organic hull blistered and burned under the assault. The Intrepid and Dauntless split to either side, targeting the Reaper's weapon nodes with precise laser fire. "Maintain course," Jin ordered as the Horizon shuddered under return fire from the Reapers. Damage reports flashed across his console as systems throughout the ship reported failures. They've never faced an enemy who would take damage to inflict greater damage. The human ships tore through the heart of the Reaper formation, their unconventional tactics creating chaos in the previously coordinated swarm. Reaper vessels collided with each other as they tried to reposition, their biological nature making them vulnerable to the confusion created by the humans' seemingly suicidal charge. On the Ardani station, the shields came back online after the power cycle, now pulsing with a different frequency that the Reapers would need time to analyze again. Through the observation windows, Mira and the others watched in awe as explosions bloomed across the void. The smaller human vessels were darting between massive Reaper ships, firing weapons that seemed impossibly powerful for their size. "They're actually winning," whispered Elder Terra in disbelief. The 3 human warships regrouped on the far side of the Reaper formation, having cut straight through it. 7 Reaper vessels were now drifting, their hull integrity compromised. The remaining ships were trying to reform their attack pattern, but their legendary coordination seemed broken. The Horizon, despite showing visible damage to its hull, turned for another attack run. The Intrepid and Dauntless moved to flanking positions. "Their command ship has been identified," Jin announced, pointing to the largest Reaper vessel near the center of their formation. "All vessels, focus fire on target Alpha. Breach its outer hull and deploy boarding pods." Mira's translator must have made an error. She turned to the nearest human technician who had remained on the station. "Did he say boarding pods? They're going to enter a Reaper ship." The human technician nodded. "Standard protocol. Commander Jin leads the boarding team himself." "That's suicide," Elder Terra said, her skin pale with shock. The human simply shrugged. "They said the same thing the first time we tried it. Turned out the Reapers have no internal defense systems. They never expected anyone to get inside their ships." The 3 human vessels coordinated their second attack with precision that even the Ardani, known for their synchronized movements, found impressive. They struck the Reaper command ship from 3 directions simultaneously, concentrating their fire on a single section of its hull. The organic material blackened and then split open, revealing the glowing interior. From the Horizon's ventral bay, 5 small, armored pods launched directly into the breach. They disappeared into the Reaper ship just as the human vessels pulled away from the counterattack. "Commander Jin is inside the Reaper command ship," the human technician explained to the astonished Ardani. "With him are 20 of our best combat specialists. They'll destroy it from within." The battle continued in space, with the human ships now adopting a more defensive posture, drawing Reaper fire away from the command ship where their boarding team operated. Despite taking significant damage, the human vessels moved with remarkable agility, never staying in one position long enough for the Reapers to concentrate their fire. 30 minutes passed, with the Ardani watching in tense silence. Then, suddenly, the massive Reaper command ship shuddered. Explosions rippled along its length from within. Its weapons fell silent, and its coordinating signals to the other Reaper vessels ceased. "They did it," Mira whispered as the Reaper command ship began to break apart. From the dying vessel, a single human shuttle emerged, flying erratically but making its way toward the horizon. The remaining Reaper ships, suddenly lacking central coordination, began to break formation. Some continued fighting in an uncoordinated fashion, while others began to retreat toward the edge of the system. The human warships, despite their damages, pressed the advantage, targeting the disorganized Reapers one by one. The Ardani watched in amazement as the predators that had terrorized their world for weeks were now the ones being hunted. Sunlight streamed through the crystal dome of the rebuilt Ardani Council chamber, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. 3 months had passed since the battle that had driven the Void Reapers from Ardani space. The city outside the windows showed signs of reconstruction. New structures rising beside damaged ones, the silver spires that had been the planet's pride slowly being restored. The chamber itself had been redesigned. The traditional circular council table remained at its center, but new sections had been added to accommodate visitors with different body types. Today, those sections were filled with representatives from 3 other species, all former targets of the Reapers who had traveled to Ardani space after hearing of the unprecedented victory. Elder Terra stood beside Captain Hyun near the large display wall showing star maps of the surrounding sectors. Tara's formal robes had been modified with a small pin bearing Earth's emblem, a gift from the human delegation. Captain Hyun wore her formal uniform, the dark blue material accented with silver markings of rank, several new medals visible on her chest. "The Void Reapers have retreated beyond the outer rim," reported Hyun, pointing to a distant sector on the star map. "According to our long-range scouts, they've abandoned their harvesting operations in 3 neighboring systems. They won't return to Ardani space anytime soon." The representatives from the other species murmured among themselves. The Tellarians, a crystalline species with translucent bodies, glowed with evident relief. The Vox, who communicated through color patterns across their wide, flat bodies, pulsed with hopeful blues and greens. The Naren delegates, tall and thin with 4 arms similar to the Ardani, performed their gesture of gratitude. "Never before have the Reapers been driven back so completely," said the lead Tellarian representative, her crystalline voice chiming like bells. "Our people have hidden from them for generations. The idea that they could be defeated seemed impossible." Commander Jin, now recovered from injuries sustained during the boarding operation, stepped forward. "The Reapers aren't invincible. They've just never encountered determined resistance before. They're predators. They seek easy targets. And yet, you chose to make yourselves targets on our behalf," said Elder Terra, turning to Hyun. The question that had lingered since their first meeting finally found voice. "Why did you answer our call? Your species clearly values survival. Involving yourselves in our war risks your people." A moment of silence fell over the chamber. The other representatives leaned forward, equally curious about the answer. Humans were still largely unknown in this sector of space, having kept themselves hidden until the Ardani distress call. Hyun looked out at the stars visible through the chamber's crystal dome. Her expression softened slightly, revealing a glimpse of something beyond the military discipline she typically displayed. Humans have a saying: "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good beings to do nothing." She turned back to face the assembled representatives. "Earth's history is complex and often violent. We fought among ourselves for most of our development. We nearly destroyed our planet more than once." Engineer Sung, who stood with Mira near the technical stations, nodded solemnly. "Our path to the stars was not peaceful like yours. We learned to build by first learning to destroy. When we finally reached space," Hyun continued, "we discovered the Reapers early in our exploration. We watched them consume a civilization that never had a chance to defend itself. We were too few then to help directly, but we learned. We prepared. We've been searching the stars for those worth fighting alongside." Terra touched the Alliance document before them, a formal treaty written in the languages of all 5 species now present. "And you found us?" "No," Hyun smiled, the expression warming her usually stern features. "You found us." The ceremony that followed was broadcast across Ardani space and to the homeworlds of the visiting species. One by one, representatives approached the central table and added their authorization to the Alliance document. The humans went last, with Captain Hyun placing her hand on the scanner that recorded her genetic signature alongside her authorization code. "With this alliance," she announced, "we commit to mutual defense and cooperation. Earth will provide military protection and training. In return, we seek to learn from your scientific and cultural achievements." After the formal proceedings concluded, the chamber transitioned to a celebration space. Food and drinks from all 5 worlds were shared, though with careful guidance about which species could safely consume which offerings. The humans seemed particularly interested in Ardani fruit, while politely declining to explain exactly what was in their own dark beverages that made the Tellarians glow more intensely after consumption. Mira found Engineer Sung examining the newly installed defense monitors. Despite the celebration, he still carried tools in his many pockets and seemed more comfortable with technology than social gatherings. "Your modifications to our shields saved thousands of lives," she told him. "The southern continent would have been destroyed without them." Sung shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It was good engineering, that's all. Your systems were well designed, just for the wrong purpose. Will you be returning to Earth now? Mira asked, trying to keep disappointment from showing in her skin patterns. Actually, I've been assigned to the permanent installation here, Sung replied. Captain Hyun believes our technologies can be integrated more fully. She wants me to work with your scientists on developing defensive systems that match your cultural values. Across the room, Commander Jin was surrounded by young Ardani, who had joined the newly formed Defense Corps. Unlike the humans, who stood comfortably in the Earth-standard gravity, the Ardani moved with their characteristic flowing grace. Yet something about them had changed. They stood straighter, more alert. They had learned to be vigilant without sacrificing who they were. You don't need to become like us, Jin was telling them. Your strength comes from your cooperation, your unity. We'll teach you to defend yourselves, but never at the cost of what makes you Ardani. Elder Terra found herself beside Captain Hyun again as the celebration continued. Outside the Crystal Dome, the first of the human defense platforms could be seen taking position in orbit, a permanent presence that had been part of the alliance agreement. There will be more Reaper attacks elsewhere, Tira said, her tone somber despite the celebration. They won't give up their hunting grounds easily. No, agreed Hyun. But they'll find different hunting grounds now. Protected ones. This alliance isn't just about saving the Ardani. It's about changing the power balance in this sector of space. And if we encounter threats worse than the Reapers? Tira asked. Hyun's expression became serious again. They exist. We've seen evidence of them beyond the galactic arm. That's another reason we sought allies. Some challenges are too great even for humans to face alone. Is that why you stayed hidden until now? You were waiting for the right allies. Partly, admitted Hyun. But also because not all species would welcome us. Our history, our biology. We evolved as predators, as warriors. Some cultures would see us as a threat rather than protectors. Tira considered this. Perhaps we needed a predator to fight predators. Perhaps, Hyun agreed. But the best predators know when to hunt and when to protect their pack. Humans learned that lesson the hard way. As the celebration continued into the evening, representatives from all 5 species mingled more freely. Cultural barriers began to lower as they shared stories of their worlds. The Tellarians demonstrated their crystalline art, creating beautiful light patterns that danced across the chamber walls. The Vox performed a traditional color symphony, their bodies shifting through complex patterns too rapid for most other species to fully appreciate. The Narration shared their famous thought poems, translated imperfectly but still moving. The humans offered music, powerful sounds produced by instruments that most of the other species found too loud but undeniably emotional. They also shared images of Earth, showing landscapes of remarkable diversity that left the other representatives in awe. As the first stars became visible through the crystal dome, Mira found herself standing between Sung and Dai, watching the different species interact. Do you think this alliance will last? She asked them. We're so different from each other. Dai, who had been training the Ardani Defense Forces, nodded confidently. The best alliances are between different peoples with complementary strengths. Your people create and build. The Tellarians understand patterns we can barely perceive. The Vox communicate in ways we're still learning to comprehend. The Narration think in dimensions that challenge even our best scientists. And humans? Mira asked. We protect, Sung said simply. It's what we've learned to do best. Across the chamber, Captain Hyun raised a glass and a traditional Earth toast. To new beginnings, she said, and to a galaxy where peace is protected by those strong enough to defend it. The representatives from all 5 species raised their various drinking vessels in response. For the first time in living memory, the shadow of the Void Reapers no longer darkened their thoughts of the future. Something new had begun, an alliance born of desperation but sustained by hope. And it had all started with a desperate plea for help, answered by the most dangerous beings in the galaxy.